Now let us learn about management of forest. In our previous session, we have discussed about the stakeholders of forest. So here we need to consider if the goals of all above stakeholders with regard to the management of the forest are same or not. We have seen that forest resources are always made available for industrial use, and how? At the rate which is below the market value. So they get all these forest resources very cheaply for their industrial use, whereas these are denied to local people. Now let us learn about the very important the Chipko Andolan, which means hug the trees movement. This is very important. The Chipko Andolan, hug the tree movement, was the result of a grassroots level effort to the end of needs of the people from their forest. The movement originated from an incident in a remote village called Reni in Garhwal, high up in the Himalayas during the early 1970s. What was actually happened for this movement? Let us learn. There was a dispute between the local villagers and a logging contractor who had been allowed to fell trees in a forest close to the village. So, what happens? On one particular day, the contractor's workers appeared in the forest. When? When the men of the village were absent. And for what the contractor has sent his workers? To cut the trees. And when the men of the village were not present. So on that particular day, what happened? The women of the village came to know that this way the contractor has sent his workers to cut the tree. So this women of the village reached to the forest quickly, and what did they do? They collapsed the tree trunks, and as shown in the figure, they stood in the position like hugging the tree, so as they can prevent the workers from felling the trees, and this way they did not allow the workers to cut the trees, and the contractor had to withdraw. He couldn't do anything about this step of the women of the village. So this is very important movement which is known as Chipko Andolan, Hug the Tree movement, and it was originated in the remote village called Reni in Garhwal, high up in the Himalayas. So this you will remember. In simple words, when there was a contractor who came to cut the trees with his worker, when the men of the village were absent, and at that time this women of the village took initiative and they did not allow the workers to cut the trees. And then the Chipko movement, hug the tree movement, quickly spread across all the other communities and even in media, and forced the government to whom the forest belongs to rethink their priorities in the use of forest produce. So, because of this Chipko movement, people forced government to rethink about their priorities, that for what purposes they are cutting the trees. Experiences have taught people that the destruction of forests affected not just the availability of forest products but also the quality of soil and the sources of water. Participation of local people can indeed lead to the efficient management of forest, as we have seen in this example of chipko movement, that it was initiative taken by women of the village. So active participation of local people can lead to the efficient management of forest. Now, let us see an example of people's participation in the management of forest. In 1972, the West Bengal Forest Department recognized its failure in reviving the degraded sal forest in the southern western district of the state. So basically, the forest department felt their failure in reviving the degraded sal forest. There were clashes between forest officials and villagers about the management of forest. Forest and land related conflicts in the region were also a major factor. Accordingly, the department changed its strategy, making a beginning in the Arabari forest range of Midnapur district. Here, at the instance of a far-seeing forest officer, A.K. Banerjee. So his role was very important. He was forest officer A.K. Banerjee. Villagers were involved in the protection of 1,272 hectares of badly degraded sal forest. So, this forest officer, A.K. Banerjee, has involved all the local people for protection of degraded sal forest. And in return for help in protection, villagers were given employment in both silviculture. Now, what is silviculture? It is the growing and cultivation of trees. So, these people, local people, helped this officer for protection of forest. So, in return, the local people, the villagers, were given employment in silviculture and harvesting operations also. And they were given employment in harvesting operations. How? 25% of the final harvest, and they were allowed the fuel wood and the fodder collection on payment of nominal fee. The local people also participated actively for protecting forest, and one more benefit they were having, that they were given employment in silviculture and also in harvesting operations. So with the active and willing participation of local people and community, the sal forest of Arwari underwent a remarkable recovery by 1983, and it was the great achievement that the sal forests become the forest of worth value rupees 12.5 crores, and before it was worthless, but because of local people have participated actively and because of their willingness, it has done a great job. So from this example we can see that how local people and the forest departments, the forest officers, active participation for protecting the forest has brought a remarkable recovery and how it lead to better and sustainable management of forest. So this is all about the examples of management of forest, wherein we learned the Chipko Andolan, the Hug the Tree movement. Also we have seen an example of local people's participation, that how the degraded sal forest gain a remarkable recovery.